Man, I am really excited for today's podcast. I have a guy on who I don't listen to a ton of podcasts, but when I do, I definitely listen to Joseph on Benedikt's podcast. And he's just such a knowledgeable dude. If I want to know about a caliber, especially some of the weird calibers that I like, Joseph's the guy whose YouTube videos I'm watching. He is like just one of the authorities when it comes to firearms in the industry and somebody who I respect a lot. So Joseph, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for that resounding introduction, Drew. I don't think I deserve it, but I appreciate it.
Oh man, like I don't listen to a ton of hunting pods anymore, but I do love listening to your stuff just because I like real cut and dry. Like this is what it's like. I like knowledgeable things to listen to, and your stuff is just I know when I hear you talk, there's no BS there. It's from real world experience and a ton of just research. Actually, more research than I would care to ever do. You're kind of a gun nerd, I
Well,
would
and
say.
I'll wear the title with pride, my friend. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And we were actually talking before we got on the pod. Very similar lives, right? We both have kids, kind of in the 10 to 18-year-old range. Getting out and hunting with them, dealing with. We both had knee surgeries on our kids. Our kids are driving, doing
Yeah,
stuff. But just similar times in our lives with doing the family thing and the hunting thing. And I just wanted to have you on, man, and just talk about Joseph on Benedikt, talk about some firearms, and have a good time with you.
that sounds good.
We were saying before too. You are the reason why 280 Ackley is my favorite 7 millimeter cartridge.
Well, I I'm glad to have had a good influence on you there, Drew. It's an extraordinary cartridge. It's one that I've used for a long time, and it's one of those grassroots cartridges that was never really promoted by any big company. It came to fame purely on its own merits, and there's a lot of characteristics to love, but that's one of the things that just makes it near and dear to my heart. Is that it earned its feathers the hard way.
It really does, and I've like one thing you'll learn about me, like anyone who hears me talk for any period of time, is I like standard action cartridges. I'm not a big Magnum guy, just for like feeding issues, more rounds down chamber. It's just I'm a standard guy, and the 280 Ackley really does. You can stack it up against a 7 mag, pretty darn near out to ethical hunting ranges or out to what you call it. I mean, even out to 700 yards, no problem. And that's kind of what I wanted to have you on today to talk about was cartridges and we get all these new cartridges every year. There's a new cartridge, and you feel like, man, my grandpa's 30-06 isn't going to work. I have to get that new cartridge, or I'm not going to be able to kill something. And I
Hmm.
feel like there's this, which is good. I mean, I'm in the market, right? You can't hunt without a Tricer tripod. If you don't have a Tricer tripod, you're probably not going to kill a bear this spring or a deer this fall, right? And I want you to think that, and I want you to buy my stuff. But man, like, I feel like so many guys get caught up in the cartridge thing and then they don't go hunting, right? Because they're buying the gun. And I
Mm.
know guns are fun, right? Guns, I mean, I'm experiencing it right now with my new bipod. We're selling bipods like crazy because gun parts and guns are fun for men. But, man, like, let's talk about some of those older cartridges. Talk about the Ackley. Let's talk about the 270, the 30-06, the 30-30, and
Sure.
what those ballistically can do out to, let's say, five. I think sometimes you got to really try to go shoot past 500 yards, right?
Yeah.
In hunting, right? You really do. So out to 500 yards. Let's talk about those calibers.
So yeah, I mean, if you're running the older stuff in a traditional rifle with a traditionally slow rifling twist rate, that kind of prevents you from shooting the best of the modern high BC, really
Mhm.
aerodynamic, heavy for caliber bullets on the market. However, inside of practical hunting distances where most hunters have the skill to shoot ethically, yeah, they do really, really well. A 30-06 is still one of the most versatile cartridges ever designed. 270 is good. 30-30 is a brush gun, a big timber
Mhm.
cartridge, but inside its comfort zone of 150 yards or so, maybe a bit more if you're real serious with it, it's pretty capable. So I'm gonna debate you here just a little bit,
I want
Drew,
it.
because at 500 yards, I do think the new cartridges are making, they have some facets, some a lineup of small features that combine into one big whole that does give them a significant advantage at 500 yards. But I will say to 300 yards, I don't think there's any reason that you need anything more than a 30-06 for, your general broad spectrum of, we'll call it North American big game,
Mhm.
up to and including moose. Personally, I want more on brown bear, but a lot of brown bears have been shot with 30-06s and indeed smaller cartridges.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't disagree with that at all. Um, there's the bullet is the really the X factor in all of this, right? So I will agree. So let's say we do. I wasn't throwing that in there, but let's say we do a grandpa's gun and it's running like a 1 in 12 twist. You are going to be limited. But now
Yeah.
modern day cartridges or modern day rifles are coming a little bit faster, right? I mean, you go get a new. I went and bought. So I think I told you this. I've been shooting a Browning X Bolt. I have a bunch of custom rifles. I got the 280 Ackleys. I've got the 260 Remingtons. I'm a big 260 Remington guy. I've just now got my first Creedmoor because I've been so holding out for so long. But it's the
That's funny.
260 is about to die because it's just too hard to find.
Oh
But
yeah.
but that 30-06 I picked up from Browning last year, every animal I pointed it out to 400 yards dropped with one bullet this year.
Yeah.
I think I killed 8 animals, deer, antelope, everything with it. It just works, and and I did hand load for it, so I was actually on that one. I'm a big mono metal guy. I
Mhm.
did load the 152 hammers, and I'm shooting them 3160 out of it. So I mean,
Okay.
it's ripping 3160, and out to about 450 yards. It has all the energy and all the velocity I need for it to do what I need to do.
Sure.
And
It's almost a magical combination of good authority, which of course is a lineup of several features. You got bullet weight, you got frontal diameter, adequate velocity, and so forth at a level of recoil that most shooters can manage with a little bit of practice. And so, yeah, the 30-06 is a great package. And in fact, I did a couple of articles for Shooting Times, and then I followed that up with a podcast some years ago titled Getting the Best Out of Your 30-06. You can load that cartridge. You mentioned hand loading. You can load it with some pretty modern bullets. You may not get those 210, 220 grain, super sleek, heavy bullets going
mhm,
fast enough to be useful out of it. But man, you can shoot something like a 190 grain Nosler Accubon long range or 175 grain Barnes LRX in
yep,
there and get them going pretty fast with modern propellants. You're kind of half closing the gap between it and a 300 Win Mag in velocity. If you do that, your hand loads will outrun most of the 300 Win Mag factory loads on the market because, well, most guys are buying, the traditional inexpensive ammo for their 300 Win Mag with flat base bullets, lead tips, and so forth that just don't have that great aerodynamics. And at 300 yards, with a really ultra modern bullet properly hand loaded in your 30-06, it's going to hit harder than those inexpensive 300 Win Mag loads. That's pretty cool.
it is cool, and I am a heavy for caliber guy. Like I don't think you're a
Hmm.
308 fan, right? You're not a 308 fan.
Within its realm, I actually really like it. I think it's a
Okay,
great whitetail cartridge for use inside 250 yards. I love it in my M1A. I've got a really nice national match Springfield M1A. But for hunting in the West, in wide open country, no, it lacks two things for me. It lacks muzzle velocity and it lacks the ability to push heavy for caliber bullets at useful velocities. The 30-06 crosses the cusp
it does cross.
into that realm. Yes.
So I will debate you on that one a little bit. I'm just
Let's
talking these
have it.
cards. I like it. I have turned the 308 into my son's. This is a gun that I love for kids and
Hmm.
even my partners. It's an entry level gun that I love. And what I load in that thing is I'm running IMR 4064. I'm looking at it right now on the reloading bench, and I'm running the 168 TTSX out of it. And I'm pushing them around 2,700, 26 to 2,700 feet per second, and it is a 400-yard gun all day long.
Sure.
All day long. And we've killed elk out to like 350. My kid shot a really good mule deer last year at 385. But I have to know its abilities. And the only reason I chose 308 over 6.5 Creedmoor is dealing with kids. I've had some. I've had some circuses, like, they were shooting
Yeah.
243 at first. It was 243, and I've had some circuses with 243 where I feel like the large frontal diameter of those 308 bullets really does inflict some more damage when it gets there, right? Like, you get a little marginal, a little bit further back, get a liver shot or something, it put some more, damage there
Yeah.
when I use it, and that's what we do it for. But I do load heavy for caliber in that, and in my 30-06, I am a heavy for caliber guy, and it's the first time I jumped down. I was low in the 175s, and I'm not a big velocity guy. I really not. I'm a BC guy. I'm a
Mhm.
downrange guy because I understand that, yes, while we used to shoot, 270 super flat and fast, well, it starts fading around 300 yards, right?
Sure.
So there's this weird balance you do when you reload with the 30-06 is you can't get the velocities you really want out of those heavy for caliber bullets, right? Like you really do want to get them up there over 2,800, and you can't. You're kind of right there in that 26, 2,700 range. And then end up loading some of those hammers, and I think you've messed with hammers a little bit. And sometimes
Yeah.
they just work. And I'm friends with Steve, and man, that thing just it was shooting him 3160 out of a
Woo!
30-06, and
That's
it just
moving.
cooked. It's moving, but honestly, it's almost the same exact. By the time you get to 400 yards, it's doing the same thing that LRX is doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Then, of course, the LRX still has the weight. The
Yeah, when it gets
168
there,
grain LRX, yeah. No, I kinda went that way for a while, and I had a lot of fun playing with the ultra lights. I was shooting a 110 grain bullet out of a 270, just screaming, and the 130s out of, 30-06 and 300 WSM and so forth. It's a lot of fun, but you're right. I mean, they're laser flat to 250, 300 yards, and then the wind goes out of their sails and they kind of fall limp because
yeah,
there's not the aerodynamics there. But the load that I settled on for hunting with the 308 most of the time is 150 grain Barnes
yeah,
TTSX because it penetrates like a 165 or even a 180 traditional lead core, cup and core bullet. And yet out of a 308, I can push it pretty fast. And
like
I've
29 or
shot,
something.
yeah, getting close to that. And I've
Yeah,
shot black bears and antelope and various things with that. But you know, anymore when somebody says 30 caliber, unless you're talking a mono-metal bullet, my brain goes to 200 grain and heavier bullets.
really,
Yeah, I love the Hornady 200 grain ELDX. My favorite currently is probably the 200 grain Federal Terminal Ascent. That is just a tremendous bullet. As you probably know, the rear half of that is kind of monometal. It's got a
yeah.
front lead core bonded in place. Super aerodynamic bullet. And that in any of the 30 caliber magnums is just a magic sledgehammer on game.
Yeah, I can say so. I want to talk about weight because now you brought something up that's very controversial right now, and I
Sure.
know I have a lot of friends on Rockslide. We sponsor Rockslide, but I get them really mad because weight doesn't matter, Joseph. Everyone over there now is shooting a 6 millimeter bullet. They're actually shooting a Sierra Match King, the tip Match King 80 grain, and I know they're going to come and get me. Come and get me, Rockslide. It's fine because I'm a fud for shooting 30-06, and energy doesn't matter, right? Energy doesn't matter. Large frontal diameter doesn't matter. It's bullet placement, and that's what matters. And man, I'll tell you what. I go and shoot my 6.5 at a target at 400 yards, and it hits the metal target. And then I pick up my father-in-law's 30 Nosler with a 220 grain Burger, and I shoot that same
Mhm.
target, and the target falls over.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
man, why do you care about the weight of the bullet? Like, because right now we're in this big push where it's like, no, we want longer, skinnier, lighter bullets that go, that are have more BCs and do more, and they don't want blood trails. They want just to explode inside and do it. So
Yeah.
there's a big push for that right now. I mean, in fact, like if I said this, there'd be a 10-page thread on Rockslide bashing me,
So are
right now.
you wanting me to address this, Drew? Is that why you're commenting on this, or are we
I
just
am.
mentioning that it's a trend?
No, no, I want you to address it. I want you to address, like, why would you care? Because I agree with you. I tend to look at energy. I still look at 1,500 pounds of energy. I still look at 1,000 pounds of energy. And I feel like when you have that energy, you have the velocity as well that you need.
It energy to me is useful, but it is a flawed metric because it's so
Mhm,
heavily influenced by velocity. You can crank up
mhm.
a super light 22 250 bullet and cause some, create some very impressive energy numbers, and yet that's, in my opinion, still never going to be a good elk cartridge, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I I tend to think of cartridges in kind of my own little world as authoritative, right? How much authority do they have in it? I'll rely more on the TKO, the Taylor knockout formula, which instead of just using velocity and bullet weight to calculate energy, it uses velocity, bullet weight, and frontal diameter. So
Okay.
there it adds in that ultra crucial additional component. Now it's still not perfect, right? There are so many different ways to calculate killing effectiveness and none of them are perfect. But what I can say is, there are some flaws in using small cartridges and little slender bullets. And if you recognize those flaws and you're willing to hunt within their parameters, fine, go for it. I'll never say that, a 6 Creedmoor with a 108 grain ELD match bullet isn't more effective than most arrows, right? And people shoot all
Mhm.
kinds of stuff with arrows. You just got to pick your angle, your shot angle. But, if you're relying on a conversation about ballistic coefficient, BC, or sectional density, and you're saying that your 6 Creedmoor has more than bigger cartridges, you're smoking something a little funny because they don't. You cannot get, the same ballistic coefficient out of a 108 grain 6 bullet as you can out of a 200 or 220 or whatever grain 30 caliber or 175 to 180 grain 7 caliber. It just isn't there. Plus the bullet weight factor, I don't know if that's as important as bullet construction. And just like when you're
Yeah.
shooting an arrow, when you're shooting a thin jacketed target type bullet, you have to pick your shot angles. If you're willing to do that, fine, go for it, folks. But if you're like me and you've put in a lot of time to get in where there might be a really big bull elk or whatnot, and the only shot you get is at 40 yards, which means maximum impact velocity, right? You're going to stress that bullet to the nines. And the only shot you get is quartering too strongly in thick timber, take it or leave it. I'm going to stick my neck out there and say most of these folks are going to take that shot, even though they know their bullet. Well, they probably think their bullet is magic, so it's going to do anything they want it to. But that bullet could very well do its grenade thing like they want it to on a broadside shot and stop in that big shoulder. And if you're going to try and argue that with me, folks, let me just say this. I was hunting with the 6 Creedmoor before most people were. My kids have killed a lot of deer with it. We've shot a ton of coyotes. I've used at least 3 or 4 different match type bullets on different species of game. I have a lot of background with it. And I've seen that 108 grain ELD match that's so popular stop on a neck shot on a 2-point mule deer. This is a small bodied mule deer, hit the neck, blew up, and did not exit the other side of that neck. So if you're going to tell me that you can count on that bullet to punch through a 7, 8, 10-year-old bull elk's shoulder knuckle and 6 or 8 inches of muscle, another rib or two, and then get in the vitals and still have what it takes to destroy them, you're not going to convince me, folks. There are limitations on this type of bullet specifically and on the launch platform, the cartridge that's pushing it, right? If you recognize those limitations and you have the ethical discipline to hunt within them, fine, go for it. I don't want limitations. I am a man that does not like having my equipment dictate what I can do, what shot opportunities I can take. I maximize my cartridge and my chosen bullet to be useful in any shot angle presentation, except possibly the classic Texas heart shot, right? I'll take that on wounded game, but I'll never take it on a unwounded big animal like an elk or something. That said, if I had a world-class coos deer facing straight away from me and I'm shooting my 30-06 with a heavy bullet, you bet I'm putting it right up the tailpipe and going to get my deer.
Yeah, and I don't wanna like, I can say that the match bullets, when they work, yes, the animal dies so much faster. It like, I've
It
shot birds as an
can,
animal. It
not
can,
always.
not always. and I don't wanna, like, and I will say these guys, like, I'm sorry to make fun of Rockstar a little bit, like, these guys are such better shooters than me, and such better hunters than me. I'm not trying to pretend like they don't work. It's just for me, like, I've just seen like you said, like that frontal like I just shot a wildebeest, and honestly, in Africa, I shot 6.5 Creedmoor for everything because that's the guns they had. They
Yeah.
shoot these like 18-pound 6.5 Creedmoors. That way, anyone can get behind them and shoot an animal. And I shot a
Mhm.
wildebeest at 390 yards through the shoulder, didn't come out. It
Yeah.
spun around, gave me a frontal, shot it up the frontal, and that thing freaking dumped and rolled 100 yards down a hill. But it was shooting an ELDX bullet.
Yeah.
You know, it was shooting a nice heavy, heavy for caliber bullet that didn't blow apart. And I think that's where me and you really do agree on a lot of stuff is I the bullet construction and shooting hunting bullets. And what is your take on? Because if you were to go and talk to some of these guys now, because I'm telling you, if I put a clip up right now, this we're going to get 5,000 guys who've killed a deer with a EL with an ELDM or whatever it is, and they will tell you that the guys at Hornady are liars. The engineers are liars. They're not really match bullets. But I go talk to the guys at Hornady, right? Because we do shows together, and they're like, "Dude, that's a match bullet. we
Yeah.
we
No
don't
doubt.
recommend it for hunting, and we don't recommend it for hunting. But yes, you could do it. You know what I mean? So why?
So
Why are we?
here's
Why are
the
we bringing a
thing.
knife to a gunfight, man? What are we doing?
Exactly. And the dumb thing is their only reasoning is they don't like recoil.
Mhm.
And I like shooting big bores. I love driving a big bore just like some guys love driving a muscle car. You know, if you want to get in your smart car and go to work, go for it. That's not my style. And the other thing is, folks, you say you're going to get 5,000 comments from guys that have shot a deer with it. Okay, go to Australia or New Zealand or Africa where people shoot hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of animals a year with
Yep.
their cartridges and ask them how that combination works. And they'll tell you, well, I don't use it because 1 or 2 times out of 10, we have a rodeo. And
Yep.
in my line of work, we don't like rodeos, right? So, it's one of those things. I know lots and lots of people they feel like they're pushing boundaries by doing this, but to me, they've just found a fine tip pen that works, writes really easily, and they're using it for everything. Where sometimes you got to write in some broad strokes here, my friend. You know, you hear people talking about shooting bison and moose and elk and all these things with even the 223 and a 77 grain tipped Match King. That's another great combination and
They're
one that
doing the
I've
223 is the new thing.
yeah.
There's full threads dedicated to we're going to shoot the Tip Match King 223 for
And there are
every animal. And
and
they're
there are
but they're
guys that are talking about
yeah.
shooting an elk at 800 yards with it. And
Yeah.
I presume that was probably a cow elk and perfectly broadside, and it died, right? And so they call that a success. I call it a stunt, Drew. And okay, we're getting in the weeds here. We're going to draw some smoke here, but um, the fact is that is a great bullet, a terrific bullet in the 223 for use within its correct parameters, right? And funny enough, you say it's a new thing, right? I was hunting with that bullet years ago. I got some of basically that bullet was strongly encouraged by Black Hills Ammunition, who was working closely with Sierra on some special ammunition for our elite forces overseas. And they were working to develop something that ruptured more consistently and more catastrophically than the standard canneled 77 grain Match King, which was the go-to at the time. And I started hunting with that thing long time ago. I shot a coyote with it 749 yards. No, I tell you wrong. 549 and then another 719 yards. And it kills, right? It's a good bullet within its realm. But I there are times when it just isn't appropriate. My son William's best buddy shot a real nice 4x4 with cheaters, 200 yards with that bullet his first hunting season. He was 10 years old, made a perfect center of both lungs broadside shot, right? This is like the ultimate. You're close enough. It's broadside. His shot placement was ideal. He and his dad looked for that deer for hours before they finally found it. There wasn't a speck of blood. It had gone, if memory serves, about 200 yards and slid under a big log. And they were real lucky they found it at all. It died, but it didn't bleed and it didn't die fast. And that
Mm.
was ideal shot circumstances, right? If he'd blown a 130 grain 270 bullet through that buck, it would have gone 20 to 40 yards and there'd have been blood everywhere, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and I totally agree with you. I just, and I'm not trying to. I know I'm going to get some hate for this one, which is fine, because people kill things all the time with those bullets. It's just for me, like especially with kids, and especially with like new hunters, and they're hearing this and they're hearing it as like as the canon, as like biblical truths. Like you have to. This is what you use, and basically there's this big push to the 30-06 is dead. These 30 caliber bullets are useless. You get all the recoil. You want the follow up shot, and I'm like sitting here like I just want to take one shot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I do love like I love that hard quartering shot with like my 30-06, or I've
Oh,
done
me
the frontal.
too.
I love that frontal shot, man. Like I shot an antelope this year and it went right behind. It was hard quartering. You see the videos out right now on YouTube. And I shot that thing with a 30-06 right behind the shoulder. It went end to end, came out the rear ham, and it
Mm,
just it blew that thing. The slow motion of the video, it goes the size of a basketball. Poof, poof, comes back in. That thing was
wow.
done. Right?
Awesome.
I
Yeah.
shot a coos deer last year, and it came into water, and I was shooting a 260 Remington, shooting the hammers, and I put
Mhm.
that thing right through the chest, and it went end to end through that animal. It went 40 yards and died. And I like the ability to take those shots, and those were actually pretty simple shots. But a lot of times you're going to hunt an elk, and you're in just they live in the crappiest spots. When it's
Yeah.
rifle season, it's not like they're out there bugling. I mean, unless you draw a once in a lifetime tag, you're typically shooting like cross canyon, down canyon, up canyon,
And
hard
then
quartering away. you know,
and often in thick timber at
yeah,
funny angles.
yeah,
A few years back, I did a count, and I had shot as many mature bull elk inside of 100 yards as I had outside, and almost all of those were in timber and at funny angles. Eh, those are times where you want a big hammer, just because you don't want to have to wait and hope he turns broadside and pauses in that little gap behind, between the trees so you can sneak a little thin jacketed explosive bullet between his ribs. You want to be able to
yep.
punch a big, heavy, controlled expansion bullet through his vitals at any angle that he presents.
And that's a good point you just made, right? With the you shot more under 100, and that's kind of where I've been trying to go with. Like this year, I'm doing 30-30 for a bunch of deer.
Mm-hmm.
This year, we're going to Alaska. We're bringing open sight 30-30 lever actions. Actually,
Nice.
Ben's bringing a 45-70 because he's afraid of brown bears. So Ben's a wuss. But
I like Ben.
yeah, like Ben, yeah. I kind of want to bring a 45-72, but I want to have the 30-30 too. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah.
And for me, I feel like the deer, like we're gonna do whitetail in North Dakota or North Carolina together this year as well. And I'm like, man, like a 30-30 is just the caliber you want. But I do like the 45-70. I don't know. I'm still debating, but I like giving Ben a hard time. But I find it hard to find an animal past 400 yards. Sometimes it's harder than finding one closer, right? And I really do think that I'm not knocking long range hunting. I've shot animals far, right? Like we shot some at 500 yards in Africa this week, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm really hard pressed to find a situation where I can't get within 400 yards of an animal or 300 yards of an animal,
Yeah.
right? It's really hard to do that. And honestly, if I take you out to the desert, Joseph, or we go up to your house, we go shoot out in the prairies up there. When you get past that quarter-mile mark, which is like 420 yards, things just start getting funny. No matter what gun you're shooting, right? Because wind comes into play. Like everyone can dope a gun now, right? It's so easy to get your elevation right.
Yeah.
But wind, man, and then when you get out to 7, 6, 7, 800 yards, especially on a deer-sized target,
Yeah.
I don't
And
I
then
don't
you
want to say you're hoping praying, but most guys are hoping praying at that point. Most
yeah.
guys.
Plus, then you're potentially adding in multiple wind vectors. If you're on the prairie, that's one thing. You probably have a consistent wind,
Yeah.
but a strong wind. If you're in the mountains, every little cut and draw is going to be swirling that wind, and you are going to have different vectors between you and the target of varying strengths. And man, I'm with you. I mean, no matter how perfect your ballistic drop calculator is, Doping the wind is the joker in the deck. You got to be a little bit of a wizard with wind to deserve to shoot far, right? You got to live, eat, breathe, and dream long range shooting. You got to wear out multiple rifle barrels every year, in my
Mhm.
opinion, to
Mhm.
ethically hunt, especially mountain game at extreme distances. And another big component is, of course, I mean, most folks go to the range and they either sit at a concrete bench
Yeah.
or maybe they lay down prone with their bipod and a rear sandbag and they shoot and they hit all these targets out to 1,000, 1,200 yards, validating their trajectory. That's fantastic. Do that. But then you got to get into field positions in funny angles. And a lot of folks don't have the opportunity to do that. They don't live near public land with a bunch of
Yep.
rocks high on mountainsides that they can go pop away at, right? And so a lot of people can't practice that, but even those that can usually don't. And that's a failing on us as humans, because validating your trajectory on a flat range from a concrete bench or a prone bipod does not translate then into shooting positions where you're surfing on adrenaline, your heart rate is through the roof, you're probably breathing hard because you've just run up the side of a ridge to get in position for this shot. And now you're going to try and quickly guesstimate the wind from multiple vectors and take a 800-yard crack at an elk across a canyon. Whew, you got a lot more belief in yourself than I do.
Oh, man, and that's kinda why I don't wanna plug the new bipod, but I made the new bipod that goes from 8 inches to 30 inches, and it does any
Yeah.
position possible. I mean, Africa is great. I had the ability to kill a lot of animals now, right? I hunt, 100 plus days a year, and I mean, I can't even tell you, I probably killed 15 deer-sized game in the last year, and none of them were flat on. I mean, like, just this what's I'll give you an example. My kid shot, an impala last week, and it was 200 yards away, and there was a fence in between us, like a barbed wire fence, and there was high bushes. All we had was a neck shot. And I set him up with the bipod 30 inches tall in the front with a
Mm-hmm.
tripod on the rear, because the only way we can get the shot was to get him up on this thing, and we got him set up like that. And we got him fully stable, and he shot the thing in the throat, right, and killed it. But there was no possible way to get him prone to shoot this thing.
Yeah.
It was not a possibility in where we were shooting, right? And it's very similar to prairie up by you, right? And then I shot a kudu and a wildebeest. I doubled. It was pretty cool.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so I end up seeing. Well, I'll tell the hunt story real quick. We go to the hunt
Yeah,
story
I
real
got to
quick.
hear this one.
So we were looking. This is like day 6 of our hunt, the last day, and I'd already missed my bow, and I was like, well, I want to kill a kudu, or a wildebeest. And we glass over, and I see some Barbary sheep. I'm like, there's Barbary sheep. The guy goes, we don't have Barbary sheep here. I go, well, BS, man, you got Barbary sheep right there. I'm telling you, I know what a Barbary sheep looks like. Nah, Dad. And he goes, I'm like, call the owner, see if we can hunt these things. I'd rather shoot a
Mm.
Barbary, And he goes, oh, they're the neighbors. You can't hunt them. I know they're on our property. You can't hunt them. So I'm looking at these
Mm.
Barbaries, and all of a sudden I see a golden wildebeest and a blue wildebeest. And I'm like, oh man, there's some goldens and blues. It's about 1,000 yards away. Let's make a stalk and get on these blues, and we make a stalk in there. We get to it's super steep, probably about 25 degrees, 30 degrees uphill. We get to 390 yards. We're in this creek bottom. I have a rock between my legs, and I am twisted up like a pretzel, laying there for like 2 hours. As soon as we get set up, of course they bed down, right? Or the big bull, the
Naturally.
big bull beds down, right? So I'm laying there for like 2 hours. I had to get up a couple of times because I'm so sore. Like, I mean, I'm getting sore because I'm the way position I'm laying in. I want to be in the scope, and I'm laying there. All of a sudden, a kudu steps out, like a young bull, and I'm like, "Oh, there's a kudu!" Like, and we're talking 75 yards from these wildebeest, from
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden, a big kudu steps out, and then there's a
Nice.
bunch of baboons there. So in my rifle scope, Joseph, I've got a big kudu bull, baboons, Barbary sheep, uh, golden and
Um,
blue wildebeest all in my scope, and I look at
I
my
love
like my
Africa.
I look at my camera guy, and I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna shoot that kudu. Then I'm gonna shoot that wildebeest. And I'm gonna shoot a baboon." Well, the baboon thing didn't happen because as soon as I pulled the trigger, those baboons were gone,
Yeah,
right? So I end up shooting the kudu twice. They're like the elk, man. You give them as many as you can, especially at 6'5". Gave him two, put him down.
sure.
Then the wildebeest, and this whole time I'm two, three. I didn't have to redope. It's 390 yards. Everything is in line with it. No redoping. They're all in line. So
Cool.
I shoot him. The wildebeest stand up, and they're looking around, and I'm like, okay, there's the bull. He finally stepped out. He was laying behind this bush, comes out, and I'm on him, and he beds down again. And I've been there for 2.5 hours. So I'm there and I'm yelling, "Hey, hey!" I'm yelling. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm yelling at this bull to stand up. So I yell, yell, yell. He stands up. And it's funny because these guys are like a mile away. They're like, "We heard you cheer." And I'm like, "No, I wasn't cheering. I just wasn't going to lay there for another 2 hours." So these rocks between my legs, but I'm like so sore. So then I shoot that wildebeest through the shoulder, spins around, shoot him frontal with that ELDX, dropped him right there. And I end up having him die within like 70 yards of each other in the same ditch. It was really cool. But my whole point of that is weird shooting angles, weird positions. The
Yeah,
bipod was one leg was extended, one leg wasn't extended because it was on a rock, and like it was just. And I do practice that because I do some NRL stuff. I do go to the range. I do some PRS stuff, and that really is the only way you're going to get good at hunting is for one field time, for two going out and doing some weird stuff, man. Like I talk
yeah,
about all the time. My kid's first deer was 300 yards downhill with ants biting us. I'll
yeah.
never forget it. I had red ants biting me, and he ended up shooting a deer. And like you can't reenact that at the gun range,
No.
you know.
I mean, we could try, that'd be fun.
I don't know. I
I'll
dude,
bring the ants.
I had welts. I mean, it was I had welts all around this, like, and he ended up shooting his first deer. But I'll never forget that. It was like we were laying on a cactus in a bush, and there were ants, and they started biting us. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting bit by ants. And this you can't remake.
Mm,
You can't get that in your 70 degrees wind controlled 100-yard gun range on a bench, right? That's
no.
why I bring like I bring a stool. Right, or when if I go to the 100-yard range, I'll shoot off the back. I'll pull the table out and I'll shoot off the back of the chair. I'll get on my knees and shoot off the chair, or whatever it is to make awkward positions, or I'll sit I'll get on the table but I'll stand up, right, and I'll do
Yeah,
like a low kneeling or something, because that's more realistic
for
than
sure. One of the best
anything.
things you can do is bring a backpack, and,
Yeah.
a lot of people wear little bitty day packs. I wear a day pack on a near full size rigid frame because I use that frame so much while I'm shooting. I can use that to support, hug it as a rear support from a sitting
Mhm,
position with my rifle on a tall bipod like yours
mhm.
or a tripod or something. There's just so much you can do. Turn it on edge, whatever. And something, I mean, I'm not very good about getting out and training, rucking as the term goes every day, but I do try and get out more and more as fall approaches. And when I go, I take my rifle. I go on public land. Nobody's, got a right to tell me I can't do that. And even if it's just one cartridge, I'm carrying with a suppressor, so I don't bother too much. I will find a rock at some point and make a point of shooting it from an awkward position, even if it's just one shot on that session. That way I get accustomed carrying my rifle, right? I'm getting in shape and I'm putting a lot of emphasis on that one shot, one kill method. And it really can help folks.
It really does. And one thing you said that I really like is the rear support. And people
Yeah.
don't think of the rear support. People all think of my bipod or they think of my tripod, but they don't think about what's in the rear, right? Like I'm actually a real big fan of a rear tripod support now, and using your tripod as a rear support because you can manipulate it, but also rear backpack support is huge.
Yeah.
I would say more important than the front support is almost the rear support, or just as
Yeah.
important is the rear support.
If you got time, a rear bipod or tripod is awesome. But I'll tell you, the thing I've used more than anything else is my binocular case.
Yeah.
I usually have, a good binocular, range finding binocular on my chest. And when it's time to shoot, that binocular goes back in that case. I don't drop it because I don't want
Hmm.
it banging around in the rocks that I'm about to dive into. I stuff it in the case. And then when I go down on my chest or over that rock or curl up behind that big gnarled stump or whatever, I almost instinctively just grab that bino case and start jamming it, manipulating it underneath the toe of my stock.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
usually turn it, wedge it somehow to get that rear support. I've shot so many animals with my binos underneath the back of my stock.
So we're very similar in that I actually take my bino harness off when I go prone. And
Mm,
I use it as a bag. So I'll take it off because I'll do that or I'll do a jacket, right? But most time it's the bino harness. I feel like I can really manipulate it. And I also have with that, I have my bino harness and I also have like my rangefinder next to it, so you can put that on there as well. And you can, kind of
yeah,
really manipulate it. So yeah, the bino harness is a great tip for getting it done and finding getting it killed.
yeah. One thing, excuse me, that a lot of folks don't implement into their training, if I can just offer this, is a limited amount of time. And you
Yeah.
mentioned NRL hunter. That can be a big one. You know, they teach you the discipline teaches you to find targets, range targets, find positions that are going to work, and then get into those positions and use them. And you have 4 minutes generally to engage 4 targets with up to 8 shots, depending on if you're hitting with your first
Mhm.
shot or not. Great discipline, but still, sometimes even better is to just go with a buddy and take turns picking out a rock and saying, all right, you have 8 seconds from standing to try and hit that thing.
Yeah.
And in that case, you don't have time to use a tripod. You don't have time to take your bino case off, right? You got to
Yep.
dive and scramble and squeeze, and that's about all you got time to do. But if you're willing to practice that a little bit, it can really pay off. I have a cousin-in-law by marriage that I really like. His name is Brent, and did not grow up hunting, didn't grow up shooting. He's probably the most natural at both, coming in as a beginner, that I've ever seen. He just takes to it like a duck to water. The first time I tried this drill, we had a target, on the hillside, maybe 370 yards away or whatever, deer vital size thing. We were just standing, and I said, see that? And he said, yeah. And I said, just shoot it as fast as you can from right now. And I hit the timer. Took him about a minute and a half. I
Yeah.
said, okay, here, tell me go. Handed him the timer. I just had my rifle, and he said, go. I hit it in 11 seconds.
Mhm.
Blew his socks off. And we worked until he was hitting that thing at 10 seconds or less. And it only took 10 minutes. I
Yep.
just had to say, all right, think about what you don't have to do. You don't have to take your pack off. You don't have to do anything except deploy the bipod, stuff your bino, get prone real fast, stuff your binocular into the back of the stock, and squeeze. Of course, you got to either hold or dial as well. There's a few things, there's a few components, but once you start practicing this, boy, you get faster in a hurry.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another one, man, with hunting. The kid thing is acquiring the target for new hunters can be
Yeah.
so hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I'm gonna go on a limb and say that you're not shooting a 6 to 24 scope. You might be shooting the because I'm a big I want that low end 2 to 3, honestly. I think that's more important to me than
Man,
anything.
you and I are exactly alike. When I see somebody show up with a 2.5 or 3 pound 6 to 24 or 6 to 30 power scope, I just shake my head. It makes your rifle top heavy, so it doesn't balance right. It's a lot extra weight to carry up the hill that you don't need, and you can't dial it down far enough to find targets fast and keep your eye on your target through recoil for fast follow-up shots. There are so many disadvantages to not having a low end on your power spectrum. I want 3 power at the bottom,
Mhm.
maximum at the bottom end. And one of my favorite scopes is a little 2.5 to 8 power Leupold VX3 HD with the dial up CDS
That's
zero locking
exactly the
turret.
gun that's exactly the scope that's on my son's and both my partner's guns. It's
Yeah,
a
it's
308
fantastic.
it's a 308. It weighs like 12 ounces,
Yeah.
and so I know they're gonna be shooting under 400 yards anyways, and dude, I love that scope. It's
Mm-hmm.
$500, and that scope is probably my favorite scope right now for just your standard rifle. The 2 and a
Yeah.
half to the 2.5 to 8, it just works, man, and my kid shot a freaking deer at 385 yards with that thing, and CDS dial, real simple,
Yep.
done, done.
Simple and fast and not complex, and you got lots of field of view on 2.5 power.
Mhm.
We've proved that scope out here in America, in Alaska, and in Africa. I watched Rob Gearing shoot a big old kudu bull at 578 yards. Just stoned it. He took it squarely through both shoulders with that scope. It dropped, and then it's on its side doing the leg twitch. And of course, at that far, you're not sure. So it was laying on its side with its breastbone facing us. And I said, "You see that tuft of hair on his breastbone?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Aim at that. Just fire one more. Just insurance." And he shot, and the kudu bull quit twitching. Well, when we got down there, we started looking for his bull. He'd hit that tuft of hair.
Oh, jeez.
It's like, wow. Yeah, people think you need lots of magnification to shoot far. You don't. I've got a super accurate lightweight AR that I built using all the old National Match armorers tricks, but with titanium and carbon fiber components for kind of a walking predator gun. Crazy accurate. 6 power scope. I shot at a 20-inch steel plate at an industry event with Barnes bullets once. Using the 85 grain match burner bullet, I hit this 20-inch plate at 1,000 yards, 8 out of 10 shots with a 6-power scope. Candace Horner.
A fixed six.
No,
Or
it
3 to
was a
6.
1 to 6.
1 to 6. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, I know what scope you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah. Candace Horner, who's the wife of Daniel Horner, national and world champion shooter, was there. She was covering it for Recoil magazine, the event. I think she asked if she could try with my rifle. Of course, she did me one better. She hit it 9 out of 10 at 1,000
Really?
yards. Then, after the rifle cooled, I shot at a life-size coyote, steel target at 800 yards, and went 10 for 10
Really?
with a 6-power scope.
Yep.
So, yeah, people think you need magnification. You don't. You need clarity, and you need consistent, precise adjustments.
Yeah, I fully agree. I ended up shooting a deer this year at like 20 yards, a mule deer. I was on a
Nice.
stock. I could not. I was like, we're stalking this mule deer. It was like 300 yards away, and he's going. We're filming, and my camera guys, he left. I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, he's not. He either went over this little knob or he's in this ditch. And I walk up and it's like, oh my gosh, he's right there feeding. I mean, I could have shot him, like, stab him with a knife. And I picked the rifle up and I'm shooting on that gun. It's that Maven RS1. I don't know if you ever used that scope. It's a really nice scope. I
Nice.
think that's a 2.5 to 15. And at two and
Okay.
a half, all I saw was deer at that range. If
Mm-hmm.
I would have had a 4.5 or a 6 power scope, I might not have been able to kill that deer
Yeah.
because it would
You'd
have
have
been
just seen
so
hair.
close. I would have been so close that I wouldn't. It would have been hard for me to even acquire it. And I just feel
Sure.
like that low end for acquiring an animal, because that's the biggest thing. That's what we started this whole conversation about. Was you need the low end to acquire, then you can zoom in. But
Yeah.
honestly, out to 500 yards, a 9 power scope is pretty great. I mean, it's not really going to
Oh,
matter.
yeah.
You're just trying to shoot a pie plate. You don't need to zoom in onto, like, the tiniest spot.
Right. It's a funny thing, but there's this transition that's happened in the last 20 years with really premium optics and dial-up scopes and great rangefinders. And that's the hunters, especially where you've got a mix of open country, have gone to relying very heavily on glassing ability. And I will never, ever like badmouth that, because that is such an important, crucial part of hunting big open country
I mean, I built a
successfully.
whole business on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you'll hear some old timers saying that guys that hunt that way aren't hunters, right? They're just deer snipers. And I
Yep.
won't say that either, because if you are serious and disciplined about your pursuit to become a very lethal hunter, and you spend the hours and days and months and years refining your equipment, polishing your skills and so forth, that is just as hard as learning to still hunt in the thickest timber in, the south or the east or whatever. But I will say this, I've found that people learn to rely on that so much they never learn the woods hunting skills that
Hmm.
used to be
Hmm.
considered so crucial. And as a result, they end up actually losing a lot of opportunities that they should have actually capitalized on. You'll hear them say, "Wow, I was hiking, up to my glassing point, and I jumped this big bull. I think he was huge in the timber, never got a shot." And that's the end of the story. Well, if they had been a little more in tune with those woods, moving a little slower and looking a little harder, they very possibly would have gotten that shot. I mean, that's how I've shot more than half of the big bulls that I've taken, right? That doesn't need to be a lost opportunity, but you need to focus on building your woodsmanship skills along with your glassing and shooting skills. And that brings us back to a discussion of having equipment that works up close. Like you just said, you stood up that buck at 20 yards. And if you'd had a 6-power scope, or even maybe even a 4-power scope, all you would have seen is hair. You got to not just have a scope that's low power on the bottom end, but be savvy enough to always keep it on that low power
Yeah.
until you need it turned up a little bit. Then you also need that scope to not be so massive that it unbalances your rifle. You throw up a lot of these folding chassis type rifles, and they feel great in supported positions, And if you practice with them, they're okay in a a standing position, but they're never going to feel like a good English shotgun, right? They don't leap to your shoulder and point instinctively. They're a piece of mechanical equipment that you need to learn to manipulate to get on target. And if you've got a scope the size of a Hubble telescope on top of that, it's going to unbalance it and make it less responsive. And then, of course, there's a lot of other things that come into play. You got to go back to that cartridge and bullet combination we talked about that's capable from any ethical angle except maybe the Texas heart shot. You got to be able to instinctively point, find your target, and press that trigger and make the most of that opportunity up close too. It's as hard to shoot really well under very tight time constraints and at challenging shot angles as it is in the open country. In fact, it's probably harder.
Which how often
And
do we practice that? Man, like,
almost
you're so
never.
right, 'cause I ended up that kudu, I shot him twice, and he ended up standing up, I got up there, and I shot him again, so full disclosure. I
Mhm.
shot him one more time offhand at 50, 75 yards. It was yeah, I just hit him a little bit low. Um, and then I mean, I've had multiple shots this year where I've had to shoot like, I shot that buck offhand at 22 yards. I never practiced that one.
Yeah.
I never practice the short offhand stuff. I'm going to today because I'm doing this. We're gonna get on the 30-30 next. I'm gonna go out today, the side by side and the boys, and we're gonna go do some
Nice.
30-30 stuff offhand, and I'm gonna just have some fun with it. So I'm gonna
What
start
time shall I
practicing.
be there?
Yeah, come on down, man. And we're gonna get into that now, but yeah, that is such a good point, man. Like we never practice that close range under 100, and so much of my shots are within that range, man.
Yeah. Yep.
So many of them.
No, it's funny. Last year, I co-hosted our inaugural elk hunting boot camp with Tate Bradfield. He's the owner of the process-based hunter organization that makes their mission is to teach hunters to be better hunters, especially beginning hunters. And they do primarily like semi-guided drop camp hunts where they'll put one guide in with 4 new elk hunters, and he's really there just to give them advice and stuff. But anyway, we did this 3-day elk hunting boot camp, and we did a lot of shooting. As one of the drills, I had a 10-inch steel plate at 100 yards, and we're on this beautiful mountain range, and out there at 470 yards, there's this target that everybody's eyeing. And I said, okay, we're going to hit the timer. And you first have to you shoot the offhand target at 100 yards. It's representing a deer vitals. If you don't hit that, you don't even get to shoot at the long one. If you hit it, you're going to drop prone, dial up, and shoot the long one. And you got 20 seconds to do both. The idea is that you hit a deer and he runs across the canyon. You have to finish him, right?
Yep.
Because practicing follow up shots is just as important as practicing your first shot. Anyway, everybody just was like baffled. Wait a minute, we're doing what?
Yeah.
Because we don't tend to practice that. It was a really fun drill.
Yeah, man. And I will say too, when he talked about doing a little bit of the still hunting, etc. Um, I think it's so important to be well rounded in everything
Yeah.
we do, right? And like I think that's why it's important for me to do like do muzzleloader, do archery, do it kind of all goes together, and you kind of put all the skills together. Because man, I could tell you right now, like one of the mistakes I always used to make was I would skyline going to a glass. You
Mm-hmm.
get it, you see a glassing knob, that's where I'm going, and then you skyline and you blow it. Like, man, you should treat every single ridge as there's something on the other side of that thing.
Yeah.
Every
No
single
doubt.
ridge, and come up and get low, crawl up, find rocks or a bush, find something to go in front of you before you go over and look down. Because I can't tell you how many times you walk up top of that thing, also you look down, and there's this, a big coos guy, white tails bouncing away because you stepped on top of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could have
Mm-hmm.
had your opportunity at a great buck right there, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And it goes beyond that too. I mean, in mule deer country, you skyline yourself like that. Maybe, if say you're coming to a point 90 minutes before dusk to glass for big mule deer, there could be a giant buck bedded 300 yards away that was going to get up 20 minutes before dark, but he sees you skyline. He'll just hunker down, stay put. You'll never see him, and you'll think there's no deer in that basin because you skylined and you don't even know what you did wrong.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Now we've got into this, offhand stuff. We've got into this, the close quarters combat of hunting. What do you think about our lever action endeavor this year? What do you think about that? Like open sights, lever action. Is it 30-30 dead? Can it kill still deer? Is it going to bounce off these sick of blacktails in August? Like what's your take on 30-30 and doing that?
Well, I'm pretty sure it's not gonna bounce off. That 30-30 has shot a whole bunch of deer very successfully over the years. I do think you're limiting your shots, but you know that, right? Your shot
Yep.
distances. But if you use something like well, my 2 favorite bullets, 3 favorite bullets in the 30-30, in descending order of weight is the 170 grain partition, Mauser partition, the 160 grain Hornady lever evolution,
The
you know,
River
with a little
Evolution. Yep.
squishy tip and
Hmm.
the boat tail. That's a really good 30-30 bullet.
Hmm.
And then the 150 grain Barnes TSX, great
That's what
big
I'm running.
open cavity. Yeah, great bullet and often crazy accurate.
Hmm.
You know, any of those are going to get the job done on any deer that walks the planet. And you know, as long as you're hunter enough to get inside that 150, maybe 200 yards, you know, if you've really worked your rifle out, you're going to kill whatever you shoot at pretty profoundly, assuming you can make the shot, of course.
Well, see, that's the thing for me is like I went out and I actually just went and bought, 200 rounds of, I'm going to be shooting the barns, but I just went
Hmm.
and bought 200 rounds of just core locks at the
Sure.
stores, like kind of like the cheapest stuff they had. And I'm going to go practice that because it's open sight. We're not going to do, you're tempted to throw a red dot on top. You know what I mean? No red dot,
Hmm.
no fixed two, nothing. And I'm going to go practice a lot. And I'm going to probably
Yeah.
shoot 4, 5, 600 rounds before August. I'll go out today and probably put 80 rounds through it and just practice those shots. Practice shooting off a tripod, practice shooting off a bipod off it, practice shooting downhill across canyon. Because that's like the big X factor now is like when I'm in a different position, where am I
Hmm.
putting that front pin? So the open sight thing, man, it's
Yeah.
different, man. Like we grew up, it's almost like, man, is anything give you more joy than shooting a 22 with open sights? You know what I mean? Like you
I know
grew up
exactly what you mean.
you grew up doing it, but then you kind of forget about it, right? You have your daisy
Yeah.
with open sights, and then you get your scope around like 8 or 9, and you just kind of forget about the open sights. But man, it's a skill set.
Let me ask, what rifle are you running?
It's the Marlin 336.
Okay. Do you
Yeah.
have aperture sight on the backside?
No, I just have the ghost ring.
That okay? That's a ghost ring. Yeah.
Ghost
Uh,
ring. It comes
yeah.
the standard
Aperture
ghost
sight,
ring.
peep
Okay.
sight, ghost ring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
peep
And
sight. There you go.
is the front sight, is it a blade or a bead?
It's a blade with a
Oh,
the
a white
fil-
stripe on it, or
no,
has
no,
it got
no. It's
the
got the bead
gold
on it.
bead
It's got
up
the
top?
bead. It's got
Okay.
the green bead on there. I'm thinking about. I got the gun right here. So
Yeah.
it's got the
You
green
may
bead on it.
consider your back sight's great. You may want to consider replacing that front sight with a narrow blade, just a square topped blade, no bead on top. Those beads are great for fast shooting inside 80 yards or so,
Mm,
but for fine shooting, they're indistinct to your eye. And
mm.
a lot of shooters will tend to cover up their target with the bead rather than using the tip of it to aim, and so you get a less fine sight picture. I grew up shooting with and competing with iron sights, and have shot them just extensively throughout my life. And I I'm a real believer in a peep sight in the back and a blade sight up front for
Really.
fine shooting with irons.
And
Absolutely.
there's some good aftermarket guys out there too. I can't remember which one the name of those guys are, but I'm gonna look them up, and I'm looking to get a new front
Yeah.
blade for it. It's a
XS
good idea.
sights makes a good one. Skinner sights makes a good one.
Skinner Sight's the one that I saw. So you said
Yeah.
XS. I'm gonna write these down right
Yep,
now.
letter X, letter S sights,
Oh,
yep.
XS Sights, and
In
then
fact,
Skinner.
the
I know
rear peep
Skinner
sight the rear peep sight on your rifle is probably made by one of those 2.
already.
Yep. Another one, if you're a bolt action guy, really good is NECG, New England Custom Guns. They build some of the best barrel band type sights and interchangeable inserts and so forth for African safari type rifles.
Okay, for doing the open sight, for
Yeah.
going to get your buffalo, doing that
Dangerous
thing.
game stuff. Yep.
Yeah, I think next year when we go back to Africa, I want to do open sight lever action as well. Maybe 45-70. I know he went down to Texas. My father-in-law he wanted to kill a buffalo with this 45-70 ever since I've known him, right? And so I got him a tag down there, and we went down this 45-70, and man, the authority that 45-70 has at,
Hmm.
under 100 yards. He ended up shooting that buffalo, and he shot a whitetail with it, and that's a cool cartridge.
Yeah. I shot my first Cape buffalo with lever action, and
Did you?
iron sights. Yeah, it's a Winchester 1886 that was rebarreled and rechambered to 475 Turnbull by Doug Turnbull himself,
Oh, I saw this.
years
I
back.
saw the I was you had me looking it up, and then it turns out that was a really expensive gun, and I was like, "I'm not buying that." So, I was it's like almost like it's like I mean, I couldn't find one for less than like 8 grand. I was like, "Yeah," I don't know where I saw I must have saw it on YouTube, then I was like, "Oh, I got on this Turnbull kick." I've been on this
Sure.
lever action kick, I've been on this,
Yeah.
this whole journey of just using some of these older cartridges and in the last couple of years, but yeah, I remember that Turnbull thing, yeah, and really custom gun.
But you can get into a rifle that will perform similarly for a lot less. I mean, your Marlin 4570s, I think, are probably the most versatile 4570s out there because they have that hard top. It's not an open top, and it's drilled and tapped. You can put optic, you can put different peep sights, whatever
Mhm,
on there. I really, really like the Marlins in a 4570. In that Winchester 1886, I think it's the classiest lever action out there. You can get a 4590. And since you're a hand loader, this should be of interest to you because you can ramp that up to shoot just as authoritatively as like the 450 Marlin Express that didn't really survive, but was significantly more powerful than a 4570.
mhm.
So you can buy an over the counter Winchester 1886 in 4590. You can run 4570 ammo in the chamber, just like you'd
I've
put a
heard that,
38
yeah.
special in a 357 Magnum chamber. Yeah. But if you want to get brass, Starline sells it and then load it up a bit. Man, you can develop a smoking powerful lever action for a pretty good price.
So, what is your take? Because I went back and forwards. Like I just got my first lever action, right? My father-in-law's got a pile of them. I got my first one. It's the 3030. Guys wanted
Yeah.
to have that classic cartridge. Plus, I can get a lot more rounds down without blowing my shoulder off.
Yeah.
Man, with open sights, it's really hard to argue against the 4570 versus the 3030 because it's like
Yeah.
I'm not like I'm going to be stretching these things out past 100 yards anyways. It's really hard to argue with that 4570.
My take is if you're a deer hunter and
Mhm,
mostly just shooting whitetails, maybe the occasional average size black bear, 30-30 is where it's at. It's easy to shoot well, it's easy to shoot fast. But if you live in the West where you may take an elk with it, or you go to Alaska with it, if you hunt Africa with it, where you may be shooting stuff like zebra and other
mhm.
tough game, the 4570 is absolutely where it's at. There's a ton of good factory ammo available for it. There are a ton of good rifles available in it. Believe it or not, I asked a marketing spokesperson at Ruger last year what their ratio was in demand, and he said we get like 60-70% more demand for 4570 than for 3030.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, I had the same reaction.
Really? Man, yeah, I just went 30-30 because I feel like I'll buy another one. I'll probably buy a 4570 here in the next month or 2 because I just wanna have both. I'm really loving it. Maybe I'll rotate through them. Maybe I'll do 4570 on the East Coast this year, and
For sure.
I
Yeah.
still I still am a little bit. I mean, I'm gonna be carrying a 10 mil on my chest for bears, but, it is a 4570 be a little more authority with a Barnes bullet
Yeah,
into a grizzly bear
for sure.
than a, 30-30 will, but yeah, man. I can tell you, we shot that bison. He shot it like 70 yards,
Mhm.
offhand with a fix too. It went through both. He used Never Revolution in that one. Went through, boom, spun around, shoots it one more time, drops it right there. And man,
Nice.
I've never seen an animal like it was almost like a geyser, just spray blood like mist because of
Mm.
those giant
Mhm.
lungs in those animals. But man, those things just they do the job. Those
Yeah.
4570s, man, they just hit hard and they
Yeah.
do the job. It was really impressive to see what that bullet did, and I'm kind of becoming a real big fan of the cartridge. It was really neat.
Absolutely. I did an episode here a couple months back on buffalo. It's a buffalo farm, right? Most of these buffalo were cows shot by hunters that came with process-based hunter Tate Bradfield to do a course where they'd shoot their own bison and then field dress it and so forth. And it's a learning experience, right? They shot something like, by now it's probably approaching 100 buffalo in the past year. At the time it was 56 different buffalo, and we talked through a lot of the different cartridges they'd seen used, and they let people take about anything, but if it's smaller than a 6.5 Creedmoor, they pretty well insist you take a neck shot, right?
Mhm.
Base of the ear, and just drop it right there, and that works great if you're a good enough shot. I went with them right before we did this recording and helped out with 6 buffalo getting shot, and I saw one poked perfectly through the lungs with a 6.5 Creedmoor. Absolutely ideal shot placement, 110 yards with a 140 grain ELD match bullet. It should be very similar to that 6mm Creedmoor we were talking about, just a little bigger, right? And it was a I actually have a little bit of a hard time talking about it on the air because it was not the result was not good. And it
Mhm,
was a big herd of buffalo. So this cow, it wasn't even a big gnarly rut filled bull, right? It was a cow. She got in with the herd and we couldn't take another shot. And I think it was, we've got it on camera, but it was 6 or 8 minutes before she bedded, not dropped, bedded.
mhm.
And then because we couldn't get another shot, we had the shooter prone, ready to take a, shot of the head, anything we could get. I think it was in all about 15 minutes before that cow bison expired. And it just wasn't a
It's
good
hard to
feeling to
watch.
watch that. It was hard to watch. And we shot
Versus a
2.
half-inch diameter
Yeah.
45-70 going into that thing and just going
Yep.
full penetration, and those lever evolution
Yep.
bullets are just those are really good. Those are good bullets.
Yeah. No, it was a a confirmation for me of what I've always believed. I've seen enough of that I just don't like being undergunned. As Craig
Mhm.
Boddington once wrote, I find the concept of being overgunned a great deal more elusive than that of being undergunned,
Yeah.
meaning there's no such thing as being overgunned. You can't kill something too dead. If you shoot it accurately and you enjoy shooting that gun, by all means, shoot whatever you want with it.
Yep. Yep. You can't kill them too dead. Exactly. I can tell you from that hunt, I mean, obviously, we're hunting high fence down there in Texas, whatever, it is what it is. You learn real quick why those bison got killed off so fast.
Mm,
You shoot them and they just circle up. It's like, "What are you guys
yeah.
doing? Run,
Yep.
run, bison, run." Nope, they just, like, keep shooting us. It's
They have that same sort of protective response as muskoxen do, where they circle
mm.
up and kind of, yeah, like, I don't know whether they're saying, "Well, if I get in a big herd, I'm less likely to be selected," or if they think, "Let's team up and protect each other," but whatever it is, yeah, they don't spook and run.
They don't spook and run, man. They just, like, circle up and get there. I mean, we're sitting there, we're having to push these bison off. It's the other one that we just shot because they were there.
Mhm.
But man, that was a fun pod, Joseph. We always end with a hunting story, and I don't wanna end with one of you guys shooting a bison with a 6.5. So give me a that did prove a lot of our points from this combo, though. Give me a hunting story, man. You got enough of them. Let's get a good hunt
Yeah.
campfire hunting
Well,
story.
sure. We I'll tell one that has the opposite end of the spectrum and that really is a classic example of why it's important to be good with an authoritative cartridge inside of 100 yards or so. In 2015, I drew a tag I'd been applying for all my life. It was a Southern Utah elk tag in a really, really good unit. I grew up within the boundaries of the unit, knew it very well. The year before, my brother had shot a 402 bull elk with a flintlock rifle in there. It's all public land, DIY. And so when I do this tag with a rifle, I went in there. I spent a good part of the summer. Every spare moment, I'd buzz down. There's about a 4 hour drive from where I lived at the time and scout. And between a friend that runs trail cameras like a madman and myself and one other guy, we'd found two really, really good bulls that we thought both of them could nip at 400. And opening morning, well, there's some interesting learning stuff here. I camped with my brother and a buddy on about a quarter mile from this herd. When it went dark, they were going crazy. Peak of the rut, mid September, and just tearing it up all night long. They bugled so hard it was hard to sleep. 4 in the morning, ATVs and trucks started coming into the highway 2.5 miles below us, but we could hear them. Those elk shut up and left. 4 in the morning. We got up, just stuffed our sleeping bags in our day packs and started following them. And they went about a mile and a half up into rougher country. We were just following bugles in the distance when they'd started firing again a little bit. And I heard a funny squeal behind me. And it sounded like a spike elk, but you never know. and we were, trying to catch the big herd ahead of us. But my brother says, he's just right there. You better go look at him. You don't want to walk away from a big bull that's maybe by himself. Excuse me. And so I said, all right, you guys stay here. You're being too noisy. I was just joking with them, and walked out on the end of this point, kind of backtracking, going straight downwind toward where the squeal had been. And I walked in there pretty ready, expecting to see a spike or a raghorn bull, but you never know. Got to the end of the point, looked off through the little meadow into the fringes of the trees below, and I was like, you know what? He smelled me coming. I haven't heard him again. Certainly I've spooked him. So I turned and headed back towards my brother and my friend, and I'd gone maybe 60 or 70 yards, sneaky style. I thought, this is dumb. We need to go catch that herd. And I lowered my rifle from that low ready position to by my side. I did have a cartridge chambered because I didn't know what I might stand up in that timber or come across, right? Safety on. And I just changed my pace from stealthy to moving quickly. And I think it was that change of pace that made this bull break. He was bedded in a cluster of boulders ranging from wheelbarrow size to Volkswagen Bug size, just in front of him to the side of me. And when he flushed out of there, he came off the ground like a quail at 15 yards. And it was one of the two monster bulls we'd been looking for. And he's very recognizable, had this palmated, three-forked end on one antler. And, of course, he came out of there going like a racehorse, and he was right between me and where my hunting companions were. And so I couldn't even raise the rifle, right? Thankfully, he fish hooked hard. And I mean, all this took probably 3 or 4 seconds to tell, right? But as he's running through the Quakies, pretty thick stuff, about 60 or 70 yards, I got tracking him with my scope, and he flashed through an opening, and this troll in the back of my mind's jumping up and down and screaming at me that I'd missed my chance, right? And then suddenly he was in another opening, and the next thing I knew was the rifle recoiled, and imprinted in my mind was a picture of those crosshairs on the front of his shoulder. And that bull had just taken a leap, right? He's running all out, and his front legs just stayed back. And he Supermaned for about 20 feet before he landed on his brisket and slid out of sight over the brow of the hill. And I threw another cartridge in immediately, put the safety on, and went running up there.
You're
'Cause I
running
didn't,
now. We're running.
yeah, I wasn't dead sure where I'd hit him, right? I felt like, well, I knew the shot was good, both by where my crosshairs had been when the trigger broke and and his reaction, right? And then I heard my hunting companions both whooping too. And unknown to me, they could actually see the bull. I couldn't see them because of the timber, but he was close enough. Anyway, they'd seen him go down. I ran up there, and sure enough, he was done. And I'd punched him with a 180 grain Federal trophy bonded tip bullet out of a 300 Winchester Magnum, center through both shoulders, took out both shoulders, and just broke his chassis down, right? Double lunged him. I couldn't have made a more perfect shot under more challenging circumstances, and yet it was only 70 yards. I tell people that was the most crucial and probably the most difficult shot of my life, and it was inside 100 yards. Kimber controlled feed rifle with a Bartline barrel on it, and I had shot that rifle extensively. It's like a part of me, which is another important
Yep.
element to me making that shot, right? I didn't even think about taking the safety off. I don't remember raising the rifle. I don't remember looking through the scope. I just remember seeing the elk flickering through the trees and my crosshairs, and then suddenly the rifle went off when he was in this little gap, and those crosshairs were glued to the front of his shoulder. And that bull scored 402 as well.
Oh man. So there you have it, folks. Joseph von Benedikt, once in a lifetime tag, didn't bring a 6 Creedmoor. He brought a 180 grain bonded bullet with a 300 Win Mag because he knows when he's got that tag in his pocket, he wants to make sure he has the authority to kill it. Joseph, what a fun podcast. I just appreciate everything you do for the hunting industry. I'm a big fan of you. My pictures fell off the wall. I'm a big fan of you and everything you do. Man, where can we find you? The Backcountry Hunting Podcast. What else we got?
Yeah, the podcast is probably the primary point for people that are looking for content online. I also have a small but rapidly growing YouTube channel that's curated, edited, published by my son William. He's 14 and a lot more tech savvy than I am, and so you can find some of our stuff on there. We'd appreciate you following along on both the podcast and the YouTube channel. And then, of course, my full time gig is a writer. I write for shooting and hunting magazines for a living. Have done for many years. Shooting Times, Rifle Shooter Magazine. Those are the two technical shooting magazines I do most for. Peterson's Hunting. I'm the Western hunting editor for Peterson's Hunting.
Oh,
I
nice.
do some for Guns and Ammo's special interest magazines. In fact, most for them. I mean, I do about 18 articles a year for them, where I do about 15 or so for the others each. Those are only found on newsstands and are dedicated topics: AR-15, precision rifle, backcountry hunter, so forth. Yeah, just look for me wherever you find outdoor content.
Man, Joseph, I appreciate it. Let's do it again. I look forward to hopefully growing this relationship and go give Joseph a follow, man. He just knows what he knows, and he knows a lot more than most people do. So thank you,
Oh,
Joseph.
thank you, my friend. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here. I really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you.